Welcome to day 2 of Once Upon a Thought. Weren't yesterday's speakers just phenomenal, Vaibhavi? I learned plenty of things from them about the power of human minds, didn't you?
Of course, Ashvi. It is indeed important for us to learn things beyond the textbook, especially in the middle of a pandemic when we have so much time to ourselves.
Yes, the pandemic has presented us with infinite possibilities.
Indeed, people have now realized the importance of education, savings, and investments.
On that, I'd like to say that investing, educating, and providing 21st century skills to students are the fundamental components to the nation's continued growth and prosperity.
Here, I'd like to quote Benjamin Franklin, who has rightly said that an investment in education always pays the highest return.
Yes, Vaibhavi, but investment need not be only about money. Investment can also be in oneself, in education, and in nature.
Speaking of returns, I wonder how is it that we can return back to nature what we've taken from her when she's provided us with infinite resources?
As we sow, so shall we reap. Unveiling the truth for us, we have Keyur Joshi speaking from the group To Infinity and Beyond.
Oh. According to the recent reports by the United Nations climate change body, they say that the effects of climate change are going to be worse than what they previously expected. And the previous expected reports were nothing but a doom of human mankind. Hello all and good afternoon. Today I'm going to speak on the topic Our Planet's Climate Future, and I've titled my talk is Losing Earth. But before I begin, let me introduce myself. I am not an environmentalist, never have I seen myself as a nature person. I've never gone camping or hiking, and I live my entire life in cities, that too only one city. But deep down, I know one thing that I live my life too complacent and deluded from the threat of climate change. And at the same time, I also know one thing that the earth is all that we have in common. It is, I promise, worse than you think. If your anxiety about global warming is dominated by fears of sea level rise, then you're barely scratching the surface of what possible terrors are. According to the UN, if we don't change the course, then by the end of the century, we'll like to get 5 degrees warmer. And some of the scientists predict the following damages. The damage would be twice as much as war, half as much as present day food. The global GDP 20% smaller than it would have been without climate change. An impact greater than the Great Depression of 1929-30 in the United States, and moreover, a permanent damage. They say that climate differs and plants vary, but the basic rule remains the same, which stands that for every degree rise, the yield decreases by 10%. Which means if by the end of the century we like to get 5 degrees warmer, we have 50% more people to feed, but 50% less food. By 2050, biggest cities of South Asia and Middle East will almost be unlivably hot in summers, risking heat strokes and possible death. Cities home to more than 15 to 20 million people in just the next 3 decades won't be able to walk outside them. This is an image captured by the NASA Scientific Visualization Studios in 1884. We are well below the 0 degree mark line in terms of global temperature. Moving to 2019, we're almost 2 degrees warmer, and this is just going to accelerate as we continue with our destructive actions. Therefore, we stand at the brink of a catastrophe. Half of the carbon emissions that have ever come in the history of humanity have come in the last 30 years, and therefore, it is nothing but termed as the work of a single generation. But by all this, I don't mean to scare you all. Rather, I see hope. It just tells me how much control we have over our planet's climate. It tells me that all that we see here is because we have chosen to make this happen. And at the same time, we can make other things happen too. It proves me one thing that human action is the greatest driver of global warming. And finally, it demands one thing that we as human beings finally come together as a single force and help solve this issue of global warming and climate change. And for all this, we need is nothing but a brainy technology. A part of the Thar Desert can absorb enough solar energy to completely overcome entire India's energy needs. People say that electric cars are the future, but have you ever thought going completely electric? How do you plan to manage the e-waste? Knowing the fact that burning these e-waste can release such harmful gases in the atmosphere and it can fasten the rate of global warming by 2 times. And to counter this, all that we have is nothing but a concept design of what is called as a solar car, fitted with solar panels on its rooftop, which absorb the solar energy and accelerate the car. And by far, till date, it is proved that solar panels are the cleanest source of energy available in planet Earth today. How about having windmills outside your house, but thinking this is a nonsense, knowing a heavy price tag it bears? And how about replacing it with this? This is nothing but the wind tree. The green leaf-like structures that you see are nothing but turbines which rotate and generate electricity sufficient for 15 houses. And thus having two of these in modern societies today with 30 flats can help us go completely clean in terms of energy and solve issues of power cut and energy shortages. But the most important thing that we as citizens could do is to reduce our carbon footprint, because that is the most important driver to climate change and global warming today. And for this, all that we need to do is to increase our plantations. This is a tree per person ratio, and India stands at the lowest with 28 trees per person, in contrary to Canada having 10,163 trees. This is a big void we ought to fill. And I feel nothing on climate change is complete without having public opinions. And thus I went out and asked people of, do you think climate change has started showing its effect? And do you prefer contributing towards preventing it? And I feel very proud saying it today that almost all answers I received said that yes, they knew what climate change was and they wished to solve this issue and do their bit in contributing towards it. Till date, we have been learning about this through our textbooks and through people, but now it is finally time we apply this in real life. I feel that governments and other agencies would do their job of bringing in laws and sanctions, but we as responsible youth and citizens of this country are tasked with the most important job, which is to aware people of what exactly climate change is. Human activities are a route toward descent, are a route to our descent towards chaos, but that means human actions can help solve it too. Making peace with nature is the defining task of the 21st century. It must be the top priority for everyone, everywhere. Sir Antonio Guterres addressing a United Nations Climate Change Conference on 5th December 2020. In simple words, all he means is protect all the resources you have. One such resource that is there is not going to leave your trail for the next millennium, decade, or century. And to talk about this resource, you have Aryan Kamdar coming in. Over to you, Aryan.
Well, thank you so much for that, Kale. The topic that I'll be speaking on today is indeed an important resource and yet so ignored. The topic that I'll be speaking on today is money and you, because money is an important man-made resource worth conserving. So, let us commence this presentation with a short story. Once, there were two friends, Ram and Shyam. Both of them were really good friends and had several similarities between them. Well, they did have these similarities, but yet they were two different people, and two different people have two different personalities and attitudes, and they were no exception. So what was this contrasting difference between them? Well, Ram, on one end, he was the savings guy. That is to say, he believed in saving for the future and thus, he had his affairs well planned. On the other hand, we've got Shyam. Shyam is exactly the person whom would you like to be with, because he led an extravagant life. He believed in living life king size. He had this perspective that he shouldn't live life and worry about the future. You should live in the present. And thus, he had bought certain things on EMIs and loans. And these few things included, well, these. So, these things did not matter until the pandemic struck. The pandemic struck, and then there was a double whammy. What happened was that the salaries got reduced by 50%, and on the top of that, both their parents had to be admitted in the hospital infected with the coronavirus. What did they do? Well, Ram right here, he was able to sail through the times because he had got adequate savings and investments with him. On the other hand, poor Shyam. Shyam, he faced several financial difficulties, and that's exactly where the story ends. The reason why I did not give it a definite conclusion is because I wanted to pinpoint a thing here. Because when it comes to your own finances and your own money, you should be responsible enough. And thus is the moral of the story, that disaster can strike anytime and you should be prepared financially to survive it. And that's exactly what Mr. Warren Buffett meant when he said that someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. That's from the richest investor in the world for you guys. And what's more about him, he started investing at a mere age of 11 years. Well, great people, great perspective. Well, time and tide wait for none. So start saving and investing from this day onwards. But you might ask me that, okay, we'll save and invest, but where do we start? Well, don't worry. I've got this sorted for you. Here are 5 simple tips to help you get started and plan your financial affairs. Let's dive in. Firstly, through savings. Because if you save money, money will save you. Thus, start saving early. The need for money is surely going to arise. It may be today, it may be tomorrow, or it may be a few years down the line. The need for money is surely going to arise, and thus you need to be prepared for it. Hence, be thrifty. Start saving small amounts every month and watch your savings grow and multiply. It's not wrong to say that money saved is money earned. The next that we have is through an adequate health and life cover. Here we understand the concept of risk management. It is such that you might be one of those unfortunate people who may face an unforeseen situation in life. And that unforeseen situation, it demands you to pay a huge sum of money. What will you do in that case? Well, that's exactly where having an adequate insurance comes to a rescue. It not only ensures your own financial stability, but it also ensures the financial security of your near and dear ones. God forbid, if anything unfortunate befalls upon you. The next that we have is investing in different asset classes. Well, there is this basic philosophy in investing that you should not put all your eggs into one single basket. Following the same philosophy, we diversify our investments into different asset classes, which include gold, equity, debt, and real estate, which are different asset classes. So basically, your money grows on a long-term basis, and there is this existing compounding effect, due to which your money grows and gives you good net gains. So, your money is like a tree. You nurture it and it will grow. Next, through inflation beating investments. That is to say, if the rate of inflation in the country is 5%, then you should invest your money in such a place that it should give you a return of more than 5%. You should be basically investing your money in a place that will help you battle inflation and afford the price of the same commodity when it increases in the future due to inflation. Thus, early to bed, early to rise. Invest early and maximize. And last but not the least, through patience and continuity. Well, even a noble work takes some time to show its effect. Same as with money. Money definitely grows, but it's never an overnight effect. Rather, it's a gradual process. And thus, be calm and patient and don't frequently reallocate your assets from one place to another, from this place to that. That will simply make you financially unstable. And as for continuity, well, if you've started saving and investing, then there cannot be anything better than that. Continue down that line. Because if you have a well-planned present, then you are in for a perfect and a successful future. To conclude, I would like to say that money definitely does not grow on trees, but you can nurture your money in such a way that it grows like a tree. And also, remember, be thrifty, because if you keep spending on things that you don't need, then you will soon have to sell off things that you need. And also, do not save what is left after spending. Rather, spend what is left after saving. And that, my dear friends, is the secret to a successful monetary life. And with this, a big thank you to all of you for your patient hearing and time. Well, investing in money is definitely important, but even more important is to invest wisely in education. To tell you more about this, we've got Arav Gupte coming over next. Over to you, Arav.
Thank you, Arya. I absolutely believe that people unless coached never reach their maximum capabilities, said by Bob Nadali. Greetings everyone. I'm Arav Gupte and today I'll be speaking on the topic impact of coaching classes. Children need to be coached from an early age to shape their attributes and good habits need to be learned. Children are sent to school to get a wider understanding in a protected environment. They are coached by teachers in schools and become better human beings. We all know the famous Bollywood dialogue, life is a race. And today's Indian education really is a race. Parents send their students into this competition from a really young age. Everyone pushes their children to boundaries some children can't even handle. In Indian education, extracurriculars have no importance. Studies is the thing which only matters. It is said that student life is golden life because student life is full of joy and happiness and free from all the worries in a grown-up life. But the pressure of studies has kinda ruined it. Coaching classes and tuitions are the new fad amongst parents. They send their children for coaching classes of almost every subject. Yes, everyone agrees that students need to be coached, but then why do they go to school? School is a center for wholesome education. Parents send their children for coaching classes of IIT and JEE exams from a tender age of 10. That kind of education is not required for that young age. Special coaching classes have been introduced for the challenging exams like the Olympiads, where the student gets all ready-made answers. For a broader understanding, I have taken a survey of how parents as well as students feel about coaching classes. 90 students and 75 parents responded to the Google form. Out of all the students who go to tuitions, some of them feel that coaching classes is not a necessity. All of them feel that extracurriculars are important. Most of the parents let their students explore their hobbies. A 50-50 question where half of the students feel coaching classes ensure a brighter future and half of them feel no. The main reason they go to coaching classes is better learning. Parents' opinion. All parents feel that extracurriculars is important for their children. A 50-50 question again, where half of them feel that coaching classes are value for money and half are against it. Does coaching classes ensure a brighter future? Most of them said no. Is peer pressure or prejudice a reason for enrolling a child in coaching classes? Some of them said yes. What is the main reason they send their children for coaching classes? Is for better practice. I would like to conclude by saying that in life there are no rewinds, only flashbacks. Make sure it is all worth it. But please remember that there is no other investment that yields as great a result as the investment in wholesome education. And the new educated workforce is the foundation of our community and future of our economy. Thus, it is rightly said that education is the key to success. To help us learn and explore more about our latent possibilities, we have Preet coming over next.
Thank you, Arav. Richard Branson once said that business opportunities are like buses. There is always one after the other. Yes, today I am here to talk about business dynamics. So basically, when we hear the term business, we are reminded of rich people, money, mansions, etc. But do we ever try knowing the reason behind all this? Do we ever practically mean ourselves? So basically, what I wish to say is that the future is in business. Other fields like doctors, engineers, lawyers, they too may grow and prosper. But business is a surer field provided you train your brain in a manner that I shall tell you now. Okay, so the sole aim of most of us lies in becoming the next billionaire. But the next billionaire won't develop a search engine like Google or an operating system like Microsoft. The next billionaire will have to do something new, innovative, creative, and something out of the box. To give you an example, before Facebook, was there any firmly well-established social media networking site? Of course not. But after Facebook excelled in that field, there were hundreds of others like WhatsApp, Instagram, Snapchat, Telegram. Of course, experimenting is a great risk, but a true entrepreneur is the one who has faith in his own ideas and trusts his own ideas. Imagine if this man, Mark Zuckerberg, never risked the market by showcasing his product. There would surely be 100 less companies today in that field. So we all know, India is a huge country with numerous opportunities. I as a businessman will be the one who will be trusting in people, investing in people, serving people. In case you are a businessman, you will be having your own self-respect. You will be able to create your own principles and take command over your dreams. Of course, everything is not as easy as I am conveying it to you. Even after hours of perseverance, hard work and dedication, there can be losses. And this is common to every sort of business one does. But in such cases, we should never lose hope. Instead, we should gain inspiration from these great personalities. Shri Mukesh Ambani, Ratan Tata, Aditya Birla. All of these had great losses during their career, but they never lost hope. Instead, they re-established everything and again worked hard. We are really very lucky because we have the 3 T's: time, teenage and technology. So the one who makes the best use of these 3 resources will doubtlessly achieve success to its fullest. Not only in the world of business, but in real life also, we should learn to be target oriented. We should learn to stay hardworking. But above all, we should learn to believe ourselves. On this point, I would like to give a great example of this personality, Mr. Ratan Tata, who owns the Tata Motors company. As you all know, in 2008, they launched the Nano car. The 4-seater Nano car was a super loss to the Tata Motors company. The entire company was in loss. There were literally 0 investors to the company. Mr. Ratan Tata, even after being such a great and intellectual personality, had to suffer loss in business. But his speciality was he never lost hope. He kept working hard, and more importantly, he had faith in his own ideas. After 5 years in 2013, what happened was the Jaguar Land and Rover company had to sell its entire business to Mr. Ratan Tata and his company Tata Motors. So this was a huge profit to their company. So the core rule for any business model is to work very hard, believe in yourself, and that's it. So now let us have a look at the upcoming business opportunities in future. So at the top lies the medical industry, as we can very clearly observe. For instance, robots and drones may replace doctors and courier services, etc. But never-ending business lines like cosmetics, stationery, electronics, pharmacy, insurance policies, hotel management, service industry, all these are irreplaceable, be it any drawer or any technology. So the one who picks the key points for all these business lines shall doubtlessly become successful very soon. The another segment of business management is smart investing. Besides only earning, the one who invests smartly in fields such as gold, share markets, and new startups shall surely achieve success very soon. Just now we saw the various fields and scope in the world of business. So as we know, business is closely related to numbers and numbers to mathematics. Mathematics, as an expression of the human mind, reflects an active will, the contemplative reason, and the desire for aesthetic perfection. Its key elements being logic, intuition, construction, analysis, and especially its generality. To give you a realm about the world of mathematics, we have Bailey Delia. Over to you, Bailey.
Go down deep enough into anything and you will find mathematics. So let me start with an interesting puzzle. If 6 foxes can catch 6 hens in 6 minutes, then how many foxes will be needed to catch 60 hens in 60 minutes? And let me also tell you, if your answer is 60, then you are wrong. So think about the answer. I have often heard my classmates saying, what is the application of mathematics and why do we even have to study such tough equations in algebra? Also, the use of trigonometry is not known. Analyzing a small triangle to such a depth seems meaningless, and this is what everyone tends to think. So today, I'll try to show via a few examples where areas like trigonometry, algebra and geometry are used. Mathematics has a large variety of real-world applications. General public uses mathematics in grocery shopping. Financial mathematics is used in commerce and economics. Surveyors apply trigonometry. Statistics is used in many fields like marketing and experimental sciences. Also, number theory is used in information technology and cryptography. And the list is ongoing. So now let's look at the few examples in detail. First example, problem solving. Mathematics is important in problem solving as it teaches us structured thinking, logical reasoning, abstraction, and ability to express ideas in precise language. This is not only important in science and engineering, but also in every other discipline. For example, politics, journalism, music, art, management, law, or anywhere else. And as it is rightly said by Paul Lockhart, doing mathematics should always mean finding pattern and crafting meaningful and beautiful explanations. Next example is roller coasters. Once in a lifetime, you must have had a ride in the roller coasters. But have you ever imagined what a task it is to design these amazing rides? Designing a roller coaster is not easy. They have to be exciting, but they cannot be jerky. They have to be fast, but they should be able to apply brakes quickly. And most importantly, they have to be safe. To take care of all these aspects, mathematics can be used. It can be used to calculate the forces acting on the roller coaster as it gains momentum. Mathematical equations and calculus can also be used to calculate and design the shape of smooth tracks, including loops, corkscrews, and all other features. Next example is digital music. Who doesn't love to hear to music? But mathematics in music? Yes. Sound consists of waves, vibration of small instruments, and our ears. Sound waves are a combination of many other waves with different frequencies. While all the frequencies are stored on a CD, we can hear only a certain range of these frequencies. These complex sound waves are converted or transformed into sine waves like sine graphs, and this is where trigonometry is used. The next example is rocket and satellites. Before a rocket reaches space, it has to overcome the enormous gravitational pull of the Earth, and this is only possible with sufficient speed and fuel. But more fuel makes the rocket heavier and harder to accelerate. But the weight of the fuel also decreases during the flight. These and many other aspects have to be taken into account while designing a rocket and modeling its flight path. It's not rocket science, it's mathematics. In space, the rockets and satellites are still governed by gravity. In order for the space shuttles to meet up with the ISS, for television and GPS satellites to be at the right place at the right time, and for the lunar module to be able to land on the moon, we need differential equations and spherical geometry. Once a rocket is launched, scientists on Earth still need to communicate with it. Long distance means the received signals contain noise and even small errors, which make the data unreliable or even unusable. Mathematics presents various clever algorithms which encodes the data in a way in which we can detect or even correct a certain amount of these errors. The next example is understanding data. Understanding data is really very important as data is everywhere. New data is created every time you browse the internet or complete a survey or go for shopping. Even scientists create data when they conduct an experiment. And sometimes these data sets are so large that they need entirely new technologies like the internet to process them. Also, to make sense of the data, we need statistics. Mathematics can be used to convert a large collection of numbers, all of which are meaningless on their own, into very accurate information about the system which created the data. Statistics can also be used to find out if certain information is valid or significant. Also, understanding of data is not only needed in science and engineering, but also in everyday life. For example, to interpret graphs and percentages in newspapers. The essence of mathematics is not to make simple things complicated, but to make complicated things simple. This list is really ongoing and endless. So here I would like to conclude by the lines I started. I quote the lines of Dean Schiller. Go deep down enough into anything and you will find mathematics. Thank you.
After watching this, all I can say is that numbers is just everywhere, from the schools to the banks to the kitchens.
To the grocery stores and even amusement parks. It's hard to imagine life without them. It's true what they say, that numbers indeed speak volumes. To infinity and beyond, my dear friends. Now we would like to hand over to Amrita and Raina, who will take us into the realm of discovery.
Warm greetings to our viewers from Amrita Ghosh and Rena Padmanabhan. We humans have always had an intangible desire to explore and challenge the boundaries of what we know. Is it because we feel a sense of insecurity, inquisitiveness, or the mere urge to know it all?
Helping us to unfold these convoluting thoughts are the speakers of the day who would like to usher you into the realm of discovery. We now have Vishnu Chittan Ramesh, who will give you an insight into the lost continent of Kumari Kandam.
India is a country with a very rich heritage, history, and culture. But some parts of India's history are still unknown to the modern world. With the establishment and decline of many civilizations, some parts of history still remain a mystery. And today I'll speak to you about the mystery of the sunken continent of Kumari Kandam. The world which we see today was not always like this. Nearly 200 million years ago, all landmass on Earth was combined into one single huge land known as Pangaea. However, due to tectonic shifts, this Pangaea got divided into two new megacontinents, namely Laurasia and Gondwana land. And further, due to even more tectonic shifts, the modern world came into existence. But in the modern world, if we imagine that the Indian Ocean never existed, and in its place was a huge landmass extending from South India in the north to the island of Madagascar in the west and to Western Australia in the east. It seems very mythical and sort of fictional for something like this to be present. But certain pieces of evidence are coming up which suggest the presence of such a land in the Indian Ocean. The words Kumari Kandam were first mentioned in the modern world while deciphering the Skanda Purana in the 15th century. According to the Skanda Purana, the Pandyan king Paratana had 8 sons and 1 daughter, and on dividing his kingdom between his children, the kingdom ruled by his daughter was known as Kumari Kandam or Kumari Nadu. Further, many paintings in the famous Meenakshi Amman temple of Madurai also suggest the presence of such a land in the Indian Ocean. In the 19th and 20th century, many European and American geologists found a lot of geological and soil similarities between Western Australia, Madagascar and South India. And also many archaeologists found striking similarities between the fossils of these three places. And this made these historians, archaeologists and geologists think that there should be some landmass which once connected these three places to each other. Moving on to the geographical features of Kumari Kandam. Kumari Kandam was divided into 49 nadus or 49 territories, and it comprised of one huge mountain range known as Mount Meru, and from it 4 Mahanadis would arise providing water to Kumari Kandam. In the Sangam Age manuscripts, Kumari Kandam has been described as a place filled with scenic beauty and flourishing with life. Opposing the Adam and Eve theory, the famous German biologist Ernst Haeckel mapped a genealogical tree which he published in his book The History of Creation, and in that he stated that the earliest of humans might have descended from Asia, Africa and interestingly a submerged continent in the Indian Ocean, due to which Kumari Kandam is also known as the cradle of civilization. Criticism of the concept. Although many historians support the presence of Kumari Kandam, a certain section of historians criticize and oppose its existence, and due to this Kumari Kandam is presented to us as a myth and not as a fact. According to these historians, the presence of Kumari Kandam in ancient texts was nothing more than the imagination of Sangam Age poets. Further, they also question the credibility of the researches conducted in the 19th and the 20th century. All of this brings us to one final question. That do we humans really know everything? And the answer to that is that despite our technology and notion of history, we humans still know very little about our Earth's past. It is said that if we compress all time from the Big Bang Theory till date into 24 hours, we humans are on Earth for just the past 3 seconds. And this means that we don't even know the tip of the whole iceberg. Today, Kumari Kandam may seem to us like inarguable conjecture, but any discovery pertaining to it in the future will open the doors of a new and an unknown phase of human history to the world. The legend behind the lost continent of Kumari Kandam till date remains a mystery. But has mystery ever stopped us humans from divulging into the unknown? Interestingly, it is mystery that has led science to define its way into the paranormal. So let's have Navya Shetty giving you an insight into the paranormal.
Soon after World War II, Winston Churchill was visiting the White House when he is said to have had an uncanny experience. Having had a long bath with a scotch and cigar, he reportedly walked into the adjoining bedroom only to be met by the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. His supposed contact with the supernatural puts Churchill in illustrious company. Arthur Conan Doyle spoke to ghosts through mediums, while Alan Turing believed in telepathy. Three men who were all known for their razor-sharp thinking, yet couldn't stop themselves from believing in the impossible. But just because the paranormal is the realm of the unexplained doesn't mean there isn't any explaining to do. Intrigued by persistent beliefs, psychologists have started to look at why some of us can't shake off old superstitions and folklore. So, if ghosts aren't to blame for things that go bump, what might be? Greetings everyone. Today we will look at the truth about the paranormal. Some paranormal experiences are easily explainable based on faulty activity in the brain. Reports of poltergeists, invisibly moving objects, seem to be consistent with damage to certain regions of the right hemisphere, which are responsible for visual processing. Certain forms of epilepsy, meanwhile, can create the spooky feeling that you are being stalked by shadow people in the surroundings. Out-of-body experiences are now accepted neurological phenomena, while certain visual illusions could confound even the healthy brain. For example, one young Italian psychologist looked into the mirror one morning to find a grizzled old man staring back at him. His later experiments confirmed that the illusion is surprisingly common when you look at your reflection in the half-light. Perhaps because the brain struggles to construct the contours of your face, so it begins to try and fill in the missing information, even if that leads to the appearance of skulls, old hags, or hideous animals. So any combination of exhaustion, alcohol, and tricks of the light could contribute to single isolated sightings, like that reported by Churchill. But what about people like Conan Doyle, who seem to see otherworldly actions on a day-to-day basis? Psychologists studying religion have long suspected that a belief in the paranormal can be kind of a shield from the harsher truths of the world. The idea is that when something unexpected happens, the brain scrambles around for answers, looking for meaning in the chaos. If it can't gain control objectively, it gets controlled by creating structures around itself, even if they don't exist. Even simply asking people to remember a time when they felt out of control can make people see illusory forces at work. So if a branch is tapping your window, you might be more inclined to believe that it is a ghost sending you a message. We create our belief in ghosts because we don't like believing that the universe is random. Given these strange turns of the mind, might some people be more naturally inclined to see hidden patterns and motives, and could this explain why they are more superstitious than others? A recent study asked skeptics and believers to view simple animations of moving shapes while lying in a brain scanner. Paranormal believers were more likely to see some kind of intention behind the movements, as if the shapes were playing a game of tag. And this was reflected in greater brain activity in the regions normally associated with theory of mind and understanding others' motives. Similarly, people who believe in the supernatural are more likely to see hidden faces in everyday photos and are more likely to believe that they see walking figures in random light displays. And even if you think you are immune, you shouldn't underestimate the power of suggestion. A group of students were asked to listen to sound recordings from ghost hunting shows, subtly priming the volunteers with the thought that they were involved in a paranormal study increased the number of voices they reported hearing in the fuzzy recordings, despite the fact that they mostly reported being skeptics. It seems that the merest expectation of hearing something spooky can set your mind whirring. As Churchill, Turing, and Conan Doyle showed us, even the most astute minds are given to fancy from time to time. But, in a nutshell, the actual explanation for spooks and spirits might be scarier than actual ghosts. You can't even trust your own mind. Before I leave, here's something for you to think about. Science has defined its explanation and inquiry into the physical and paranormal world. So can it stem its presence in the spiritual world as well, which goes beyond the physical and paranormal? Let us have this presented by Supriya Patki.
Science and spirituality. Can the twain ever meet? Let's take a quick look at that in the science of spirituality. Dualism is a philosophy which states that the mental and the physical aspects, or the mind and the body, are two radically different kinds of things. One of the most dominant dualisms of our time is the idea of disconnection, between science and spirituality. Ever since the abrupt end of our ancient Gurukul system, our education system has been working really hard to establish that science has to be free of spirituality and spirituality has nothing to do with science. For the past 100 years, graduates have been coming out of universities brainwashed with the belief that spirituality is a matter of personal and private life, or it is pure mumbo jumbo. People having these views have ignored the scientists of the past as well as the present who see no dichotomy between science and spirituality. Albert Einstein was also a spiritual scientist. He respected the religious dimension of human experience. He said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." Here, he was talking about religious experience, which is beyond measurement. Bringing science and spirituality together will help to bring meaning and measurement together. These two should never be fragmented or separated. Science and spirituality make a great partnership. If those engaged in science spend time in observation of their inner self than the outside, they experience a driving force or a sense of unmanifested wonder, curiosity, and inspiration, which leads them to the answers they seek. Similarly, if those engaged in spirituality apply the scientific law of testing hypotheses in the laboratory of their own body and soul, they will find the results. Scientific as well as spiritual pursuits can lead both to the discovery of ways which can help to make the world a better place, as well as lead us to the answers of the questions burning within us, because hidden within each human is a desire to prove the existence of a force that brought us into creation. Few are satisfied with the theory that creation was merely an accident, a combustion of cosmic dust. Secretly, in almost every heart lies the desire to have proof that there is God, and we are soul, a part of God. The reality of wholeness is composed of two interrelated aspects. The Indians call it the balance of Shiva and Shakti. The Chinese called it the harmony of yin and yang, positive and negative, dark and light, silence and speech, spirit and manner, manifest and unmanifest. These are part of one single whole. Our ancient sages knew this. That is why they maintained a perfect balance of science and spirituality, which enabled them to achieve great scientific success. They made great discoveries, like the proclamation that the earth is round and orbits the sun. This was made about 1,000 years before Copernicus. They had no equipments to do so. Instead, they were able to do this because all our ancient scientists were saints. They meditated and looked inside themselves for all the answers. Uniting science and spirituality has a very practical purpose. Science, without the helping hand of spiritual wisdom, can lose the ethical and moral values and can lead to practices such as destruction and pollution. Therefore, science needs the helping hand of spiritual wisdom to maintain its integrity. Similarly, spirituality also needs the helping hand of science, because without science, it can easily turn into blind faith and dogmatism. Unscientifically minded people may claim, "My God is the only true God and I have the truth. Everybody must be converted to my truth." Such narrow religious exclusivity has led to wars, conflicts, and terrorism. Science helps us to keep our minds open so that we can seek the truth and act for the benefit of whole of humanity. Do we want to live in a fragmented way? Either as materialists discarding the dimension of spiritual wisdom, or as spiritual seekers denigrating the world of scientific discovery? The choice is truly ours. I choose to embrace spirituality with a scientific mind. For me, science and spirituality are the complementary parts of the whole. Well, science and spirituality enable us to travel to a place where nothing is out of our reach and make us truly aware of our capabilities. But what if a man had such capabilities that he could time travel only based on his qualities, like curiosity and inquisitiveness to know more with a scientific mind? To take a look at such a person, next we have Divyansh Jha.
Let us imagine a man in his 40s, oddly dressed in an old vest, paired with baggy pants, along with a bow tie, seated in an old leather chair, by an oak table, performing certain experiments, when suddenly the ground starts to shake and he finds himself walking down the streets of New York City, the digital hub of the world. His eyes fixed on the vast billboards, illuminated buildings, and small peculiar pocket-sized devices known to us by the name of mobile phones accompanying every passerby. This man, despite being a pioneer of electrical engineering, would never have imagined in his wildest dreams what he was presently seeing through his naked eyes. And of course, this man is none other than Mr. Thomas Alva Edison, also popularly known as the inventor of the light bulb, which is possibly the greatest gift which a man has ever gifted to humanity. One is compelled to acknowledge the efforts put in by this great man, whose invention has revolutionized the way we live forever. Okay, now let's get back to Mr. Edison, who was walking down the streets of New York City. Mr. Edison is flabbergasted. He is compelled to believe that he is in fairyland, an illuminated fairyland. Wherever he could set his eyes, all he could see was his own invention all around. As Mr. Edison walked down the street, he came across a wondrous store, set ablaze with luminous lights, with a name as simple as one could imagine: Apple. As Mr. Edison entered the showroom, he felt like a child in a candy store. His eyes observed the strange-looking devices on display, about which he was unaware of. As Mr. Edison held the device in his palm, he observed it with childlike curiosity. Now, Mr. Edison, who had an estate of over $12 million, easily bought this strange-looking device as a memento for his trip. As Mr. Edison stepped out of the store, acquainting himself with his newly bought purchase, misfortune crossed his foot. He stumbled upon the raised portion of a footpath, and down went the alien-looking device with a loud thud, breaking the phone into two. Mr. Edison was shocked, not because he had broken his newly bought purchase, but for the reason that the complex circuits, circuit boards, and batteries amazed himself beyond his wits. As Mr. Edison held the broken phone in his palm, a million questions roused up his mind, when suddenly the ground started to shake again in a similar fashion, and Mr. Edison found himself seated back in his old leather chair by his oak table. What I wanted to convey through this incident was not only to admire Mr. Edison's inventions, but also to admire his positive outlook and mindset. According to me, the greatest attribute of all inventors is their progressive thinking and sheer drive to better themselves each day. Mr. Edison has not only become an example for his fellow inventors, but also for every human being to inculcate scientific temper within themselves. Mr. Edison has helped set a platform for every individual to share their thoughts with the world, ultimately leading to the betterment of humankind. Lastly, I would like to conclude by a famous saying by Mr. Thomas Edison himself. Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is just to try one more time. Thank you.
Today's perceptive disquisitions has made me realize that it is the curiosity or the fascination of the unknown that enables us to discover facts about peoples, places, and things. Man never ceases to unravel the mysteries of the world, especially when it defies logic.
Truly, Amrita, This reminds me what the renowned American poet and philosopher Henry David Thoreau said. If we are earnest to explore and learn all things, we require that all things be mysterious and unexplorable. For only the unsurveyed and unfathomed draws an interest to us humans in the realm of discovery.
When you speak about something you passionately care about, then you will be more comfortable and feel even more confident in your element. Following this ideology, we've had so many speakers coming up to speak out their mind on this splendid virtual platform. Well, what an event it has been. Once upon a thought, through a brilliant confluence of ideas, imagination, information, public speaking, and confidence, the students of grade 9 and 10 have created a paragon of learning with an element of fun and creativity.
The students have not only outdone themselves with their powerful speech, but their expertise at digitalized presentations has surpassed all excellence. This event has helped the students to ignite the rocket of their thoughts, to put on their thinking caps, and explore their minds with several unique ideas to broaden its horizon.
That's definitely true. So firstly, a big thank you to our Director Education and Principal, Mrs. Revati Srinivasan, for allowing us to organize this event and understanding our inquisitiveness and willingness to share our ideas. We would also like to express our gratitude to our Vice Principals for their constant motivation and help.
Our sincere admiration to Mrs. Minnakshi Sundar, Head of Senior Section, and our Senior Coordinator, Mrs. Sudipta Banerjee, for patiently listening to our speeches and enhancing us to the very core. A very big thank you to our supportive and experienced teachers of Senior Section English Department for organizing and setting up this spectacular visual display, constantly encouraging us and taking updates to better our performance. We must also thank the marvelous technical team comprising the students from class 9 for creating templates, editing, and adding a touch of their brilliance to our videos.
Yeah, that's true. And also, while we are thanking our teachers, we must remain grateful to our parents and grandparents for helping us to record our videos and guiding us through several tough spots. We also express our gratitude to Mrs. Vaijanti Arun and Mr. Ankit Majetia because they helped us showcase this event on our school YouTube channel. It goes without saying that without their help, we wouldn't have been able to put forth this intriguing and elevating session.
Also, the entire credit for this event goes to Mugdha Bhide for sowing the seeds of this wonderful idea, which received an overwhelming response. Thank you to all the students for spreading across the word so that we could get immense participation for the event once upon a thought. And of course, our gratitude to all the compares for their explicit and wonderful commentary, which made this session even more interesting and interactive for all of us.
And lastly, thank you so much all for being with us throughout this exquisite journey. Hope you enjoyed and had a great time. To conclude, I would want to say that if you can speak, you can influence. And if you can influence, then you can change lives. And with this, thanking you all so much again for your patient hearing and time.